The Dowager Duchess delivered her verdict on my mothering abilities when my son was 3 months old. I sat in the nursery at Marlborough House, cradling little Christopher in my arms while he nursed. The late afternoon sunlight streamed through the windows, making his downy dark hair gleam. He was perfect, absolutely perfect. 10 tiny fingers, 10 tiny toes, my husband's dark eyes, and my stubborn chin. But according to the Dowager Duchess of Marlborough, perfection was not enough. "You are spoiling that child, Beatrice," she announced, sweeping into the nursery without knocking. "A properly raised heir should be with his wet nurse, not constantly in his mother's arms. You are making him soft." I looked up from my son, keeping my voice level with effort. "Christopher is 3 months old. He requires comfort and security, not discipline. He requires proper training from birth. That is how nobility is formed, not through coddling and sentiment." She sniffed disapprovingly. "I raised 3 sons, including your husband, by maintaining appropriate distance and ensuring they understood their position from the cradle. None of this constant handling and emotional indulgence. Your method produced one son who drinks himself insensible most nights, and another who fled to India to escape your presence," I observed calmly. "Forgive me if I choose a different approach with Christopher." The dowager's face went rigid with fury. "How dare you speak to me with such impertinence? I am trying to help you raise a proper heir, something you clearly know nothing about. You are a baronet's daughter, Beatrice. You were not raised in an aristocratic household. You do not understand what is required. I understand that my son deserves love and attention. The rest we will figure out as we go." "Love," she said the word like a curse. "Love is not what creates a duke. Discipline, education, proper comportment, these are what matter. And you, with your middle-class sentimentality and your insistence on nursing your own child like a common woman, you will ruin him. Mark my words, Beatrice. That boy will never be a proper heir if you continue this way." She left in a rustle of black bombazine, and I held Christopher closer, feeling his warm weight against my chest. "Your grandmother is wrong," I whispered to him. "You will be exactly who you are meant to be, and I will make certain of it." My husband, Nicholas, Duke of Marlborough, found me still in the nursery an hour later. He was a kind man, my husband, gentle and scholarly, more interested in his botanical research than in managing the duchy. His mother terrified him, and he avoided confrontation with her at all costs. "Mother was rather upset when she left," he said carefully, settling into the chair beside mine. "Something about your parenting methods. She believes I am ruining Christopher by actually caring for him myself." Nicholas sighed. "You know how she is. She raised us quite strictly. She believes that is the only way. And yet you turned out to be a gentle, thoughtful man who prefers plants to politics. Perhaps her method was not as successful as she believes. Still, Beatrice, she does have experience. Perhaps we should consider hiring a more formal nurse, someone who can begin Christopher's education according to traditional methods." I looked at my husband, this man I had married 5 years ago when I was 22 and he was 28. I had loved him then, loved his kindness and his quiet intelligence. I still loved him, but I was learning that his kindness came with a weakness I had not anticipated. He would always choose peace over confrontation, even when confrontation was necessary. "No," I said firmly. "I will raise our son my way. Your mother had her chance with her children. Christopher is mine to raise." "Our son," Nicholas corrected gently. "Our son, whom I will raise while you pursue your botanical studies. That was always the arrangement, was it not? You provide the title and the resources. I manage the estates and the household, and now our child." Nicholas looked uncomfortable but did not argue. We both knew it was true. I had been managing Marlborough estates for 5 years, turning around properties that had been declining under his father's neglect and Nicholas's disinterest. I had increased the duchy's income by 30% through careful management and modernization. I knew how to build something valuable, I would do the same with my son. Over the following years, the Dowager Duchess continued her campaign to convince me I was ruining Christopher. When he was 2, and I allowed him to play in the gardens with the groundskeeper's children, she was horrified. He is consorting with servants' children. He will never understand his proper place in society if you allow him to play with his inferiors. He is learning that all people have value regardless of their station. That seems like a worthwhile lesson. When he was 5, and I hired a young tutor fresh from Oxford who believed in encouraging questions rather than rote memorization, she was appalled. Mr. Patterson is far too permissive. Christopher should be learning Latin and Greek through proper drilling, not through those ridiculous games and stories. Christopher is learning Latin and Greek quite well, actually. Mr. Patterson says he has a natural gift for languages. The games simply make the learning enjoyable. Education is not meant to be enjoyable. It is meant to be rigorous and character building. It can be both. But her most vicious attack came when Christopher was 7, after his grandfather's death, when Nicholas inherited the full responsibilities of the dukedom. I found the Dowager in Nicholas's study, the two of them deep in conversation that stopped abruptly when I entered. "What is this about?" I asked, looking between them. Nicholas could not meet my eyes. His mother smiled with cold satisfaction. We were discussing Christopher's education. Nicholas and I agree that it is time to send him away to a proper preparatory school, one that will instill the discipline and bearing he lacks from his current indulgent education. My stomach clenched. Christopher is 7 years old. He is too young to be sent away. Nonsense. Most boys of his station are sent to school at 7 or 8. It builds character and independence. It builds loneliness and emotional isolation. I will not do that to my son. It is not your decision, the Dowager said sharply. It is your husband's decision as Christopher's father and guardian, and Nicholas agrees that Christopher needs a firmer hand than you are providing. I turned to Nicholas, disbelief and betrayal warring in my chest. You would send our 7-year-old son away, without even discussing it with me first. Mother makes some valid points, Nicholas said weakly. Christopher is rather soft for a future duke. He cries when the hunting hounds catch a fox. He prefers reading to riding. He needs to be toughened up. He is 7 years old and he has a kind heart. Those are not flaws to be corrected, Nicholas. They are qualities to be cherished. They are weaknesses to be eliminated, the Dowager interjected. A duke cannot afford softness. Christopher needs to be hardened before it is too late. I looked at my husband, willing him to stand with me, to defend our son and our parenting choices. But Nicholas looked away and I understood. He had already made his decision, or rather, his mother had made it for him. No, I said clearly. I will not allow Christopher to be sent away at 7 to some brutal school that will beat the kindness out of him. You cannot prevent it, the Dowager said. Nicholas is Christopher's legal guardian. His decision is final. Then I will fight you, both of you. I will find a way to protect my son from this cruelty. I left the study and went directly to my own sitting room, my mind racing. Under English law, fathers had complete authority over their children. Mothers had no legal rights whatsoever. If Nicholas decided to send Christopher away, I could not stop him legally. But I could make it very difficult for him. Over the next week, I marshaled my resources. I spoke with Mr. Patterson, Christopher's tutor, who provided detailed documentation of Christopher's exceptional academic progress. I consulted with our family physician, who confirmed that Christopher was physically healthy and developing normally. I even enlisted the support of Nicholas's younger brother, Thomas, who had hated his own preparatory school experience and was willing to speak against sending Christopher away so young. But my most powerful ally turned out to be Christopher himself. When Nicholas finally worked up the courage to tell Christopher he would be going away to school, our son's reaction was unexpected. He did not cry or plead. Instead, he looked at his father with those serious dark eyes and said, "If you send me away, father, I will run away from the school and come home. Every time. No matter how many times you send me back, I will run away, because my home is here with mother." Nicholas was shaken by Christopher's quiet determination. He postponed the decision, much to his mother's fury. But I knew the reprieve was temporary. The dowager would continue pressuring Nicholas until he gave in to her demands. I needed a more permanent solution. I found it in an unexpected place. The Duke of Thornfield, a man I knew socially but not intimately, called on us during a visit to the area. He was known for his progressive views on education and his support of academic merit over aristocratic privilege. During tea, the conversation turned to Christopher's education. The dowager, unable to help herself, launched into her usual complaints about my parenting methods. Beatrice insists on coddling the boy. She allows him to pursue his interests rather than forcing him to master the skills appropriate to his station. He will be completely unprepared for Eton when the time comes. The Duke of Thornfield raised an eyebrow. What are his interests? Languages and mathematics, I said. Mr. Patterson says he reads at a level several years beyond his age and has a particular gift for languages. He is already fluent in French and making excellent progress in Latin and Greek. How old is he? 7. Remarkable. Most boys that age can barely manage basic Latin declensions. You clearly have a gifted child, Your Grace. The dowager sniffed. Academic ability is all well and good, but it does not make a duke. He needs to learn riding, shooting, estate management, and proper social bearing. He rides quite well, actually, I countered. And he accompanies me regularly when I tour the estates. He asks excellent questions about crop rotation and tenant relations. At 7, the Duke looked genuinely interested. Does he understand what he is observing? More than you might expect. He has a logical mind that grasps systems and relationships quickly. Have you considered having him evaluated by educational specialists? If he truly is as gifted as you suggest, there are programs that cater to exceptional children. Programs that challenge them appropriately rather than forcing them into one-size-fits-all traditional schooling. I had not considered it, but the moment the Duke suggested it, I knew it was the answer I had been seeking. Over the following months, I arranged for Christopher to be evaluated by several educational experts that the Duke of Thornfield recommended. Their assessments confirmed what Mr. Patterson and I had already known. Christopher was exceptionally intelligent, particularly in languages, mathematics, and logical reasoning. One evaluator, a professor from Oxford, was particularly impressed. This child is performing at a level I would expect from a 12 or 13-year-old. If properly nurtured, he could be a serious scholar. It would be criminal to waste this potential on rote learning at a traditional preparatory school. Armed with these professional evaluations, I presented Nicholas with an alternative plan. Rather than sending Christopher to a brutal preparatory school at 7, we would continue his education at home with Mr. Patterson, supplemented by specialized tutors in his areas of strength. When he was ready, perhaps at 10 or 11, we could reassess and determine the best educational path forward. Nicholas, who always preferred intellectual arguments to emotional ones, found the professional evaluations compelling. For once, he stood firm against his mother's objections. The dowager was furious. "You are making a terrible mistake. That boy will be completely unprepared for the real world. He will be a laughingstock among his peers." "Or he will be educated far beyond his peers," I responded. "We shall see." The years that followed were challenging but rewarding. Christopher thrived under the individualized education we provided. By age 10, he was reading advanced mathematics and had begun studying ancient Greek philosophy. By 12, he was conversing fluently in French, Latin, Greek, and had started German. But he was not just academically accomplished. I made certain he learned estate management by involving him in real decisions. He attended tenant meetings, learned about crop yields and market prices, and developed genuine relationships with the people who worked our lands. He also maintained his fundamental kindness. He was gentle with animals, generous with servants, and thoughtful in his interactions with everyone regardless of their station. The dowager despaired. He will never be a proper duke. He is too soft, too intellectual, too familiar with his inferiors. I ignored her. Christopher was becoming exactly the man I had hoped he would be. When Christopher turned 13, we finally broached the subject of Eton, the finest public school in England, where aristocratic boys were prepared for their roles in society. Christopher was initially resistant. "I am happy learning at home with Mr. Patterson and my other tutors. Why must I go away to school?" "Because as much as I would like to keep you home forever, you need to learn to navigate the world of your peers," I said honestly. "You will be the Duke of Marlborough someday. You need to understand the men who will be in Parliament with you, who will move in your social circles. That requires experiencing school with them." "But I am different from other boys my age. I have always been different." "Being different is not a weakness, Christopher. It is a strength. But you need to learn how to be different while still building relationships with people who may not share your interests or values." We discussed it at length, and eventually Christopher agreed to sit for the Eton entrance examinations. Not because he particularly wanted to attend, but because he understood the practical value of the education and connections. The examinations were held in the spring when Christopher was 13. The dowager made her final pronouncement before we departed for Windsor. "He will fail spectacularly. All your coddling and irregular education will be exposed as the farce it is. Eton requires real academic rigor, not the indulgent games you have been playing at." "We shall see," I said calmly. Christopher took the examinations over 3 days. He returned each evening looking exhausted but satisfied. "How did it go?" I asked after the final day. The mathematics was quite straightforward. The Latin and Greek translations were more challenging but manageable. The essay questions were interesting. I enjoyed those. 2 weeks later, we received a letter from the headmaster requesting a meeting. The dowager was triumphant. "They are going to tell you he failed. I knew it. This is what comes from your ridiculous parenting methods." But when we met with the headmaster in his office at Eton, his expression was not one of disappointment. "Your Grace, Lady Marlborough, I wanted to discuss your son's examination results personally. Christopher's performance was the highest we have seen in 15 years. His classical translations were nearly perfect. His mathematical reasoning was extraordinary, and his essays demonstrated a level of critical thinking we typically do not encounter until boys are much older." I felt pride swell in my chest but kept my expression neutral. Beside me, Nicholas looked genuinely shocked. "Based on these results, we would like to offer Christopher not just admission, but a King's Scholarship. It is our most prestigious award, given to the top students based purely on academic merit. Christopher would receive full tuition, books, and other educational expenses covered. He would be a King's Scholar." The dowager's face went through several remarkable color changes. A King's Scholarship was the highest academic honor Eton could bestow. It was given to fewer than 70 boys at a time, selected entirely on intellectual merit without regard to family connections or wealth. "This is quite unexpected," Nicholas managed. "It is well deserved," the headmaster said firmly. "Your son is exceptionally gifted, Your Grace. We are honored to have him join our community of scholars." Christopher began at Eton that fall as a King's Scholar. The dowager said nothing about his achievement, but her silence was more satisfying than any acknowledgement would have been. I worried about how he would manage the social challenges of school. Eton was notoriously brutal to boys who were different, and Christopher was very different from the typical aristocratic student. But I had underestimated my son's ability to navigate complex social situations. When I visited after his first term, I found him confident and well-liked. He had formed a close group of friends, other scholars who valued intellectual pursuits, but he had also managed to earn the respect of even the most traditionally minded boys through his quiet competence and unfailing kindness. "How do you manage it?" I asked during our walk around the grounds, being so different from the other boys but still accepted by them. Christopher thought about it. "I think because I do not pretend to be something I am not. I am not interested in hunting or excessive drinking or cruel pranks, but I am interested in people, in understanding them, in finding common ground. Most of the boys here have never had someone really listen to them. When you listen, really listen, people respond to that." At 14, my son had wisdom I had taken decades to acquire. His academic achievements continued throughout his time at Eton. He won prizes in classics, mathematics, and modern languages. He was elected to POP, the self-selecting Eton Society, not for athletic prowess, but for the respect his intelligence and character commanded. When he was 16, he won a national essay competition with a piece on the ethics of aristocratic privilege that argued for greater social mobility and education access. The Dowager was horrified. "He is advocating for the destruction of the very system he benefits from. He is advocating for justice and merit over accident of birth," I corrected. "I am proud of him." Christopher left Eton at 18 with a full scholarship to Cambridge, where he studied classics and philosophy. The Dowager had stopped making predictions about his future by then. Every pronouncement she had made about his inadequacy had been proven spectacularly wrong. I stood on the platform at the railway station, watching Christopher prepare to depart for university. He was taller than me now, with his father's dark hair and serious eyes. But he had my stubborn chin and my determination. "Thank you, Mother," he said quietly as we said our goodbyes, "for not listening to grandmother, for letting me be who I am. You were always who you were meant to be, Christopher. I just made certain no one broke that. Grandmother said I would never be a proper heir." "And she was right," I said, smiling. "You will never be a proper heir in the way she defined it. You will be something far better. You will be a duke who thinks critically, who cares about people regardless of their station, who uses his privilege to make the world more just. That is worth infinitely more than proper bearing and aristocratic arrogance." Christopher hugged me tightly. "I am going to make you proud. You already have, every single day." The train pulled away, carrying my son toward his future. I remained on the platform, thinking about the past 15 years. The Dowager Duchess had said I would never raise a proper heir. She had been certain my middle-class sentimentality and unconventional methods would ruin Christopher. Instead, those very qualities had helped him become a King's Scholar at Eton, one of the finest students the school had seen in decades, and a young man of genuine character and brilliance. Christopher went on to graduate from Cambridge with highest honors. He traveled extensively, learned 6 languages fluently, and wrote scholarly papers that were published in prestigious journals. When Nicholas died unexpectedly when Christopher was 24, our son became the Duke of Marlborough. He brought to that role a combination of intellectual rigor, genuine compassion, and practical management skills that transformed the duchy. He modernized our estates, improved conditions for our tenants, and used his position in the House of Lords to advocate for education reform and expanded opportunities for working-class children. He also married for love, choosing a woman of intelligence and conviction over the aristocratic connections the Dowager demanded. She died when Christopher was 30, still maintaining that he was not a proper duke, that I had ruined him with my permissive parenting. At her funeral, Christopher delivered a eulogy that was generous and thoughtful, acknowledging her influence even as he firmly embodied everything she had claimed he could never be. Later, as we walked through the gardens at Marlborough House, my son said, "She never understood what you gave me." What did I give you? The freedom to be myself, the confidence to value kindness and intelligence over traditional masculine aggression, the understanding that privilege comes with responsibility, not just entitlement. Everything that makes me who I am came from your refusal to let her break me into her mold. I thought about the 3-month-old baby I had held in that nursery 27 years ago, the toddler who played with groundskeeper's children, the 7-year-old who would have run away from school rather than be separated from me, the 13-year-old who earned a King's scholarship through pure academic merit. The Dowager Duchess had said I would never raise a proper heir. She was absolutely right. I had raised something far better than a proper heir. I had raised a good man who happened to be a duke. And that had made all the difference. Did Beatrice's determination to raise her son with love and independence inspire you? Like this video if you believe kindness and intelligence are strengths, not weaknesses. Comment below. Would you have stood up to the Dowager? What parenting advice would you have ignored? Subscribe for more stories of mothers who trusted their instincts over tradition and raised extraordinary children. Share with anyone who needs encouragement to parent their own way despite outside pressure. Hit that notification bell for more tales of unconventional parenting, academic triumph, and proving that love and support create better leaders than harshness and control.